Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Community Exchange podcast, where we talk to friends old and new, in this case, about their careers and the future of media industry. I'm Matthew Scott Goldstein, better known as
MSG.
Thank you, Louise. That was very good. As always, the Community Exchange podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, the company building a safer, fairer, and more trustworthy internet. Now I have a great conversation for you with Louise Story, the CEO of Atlas Obscura. Louise is a transformational media leader and journalist, which we're going to get into, who drives growth for mission-driven organizations through impactful storytelling, sharp reporting, and strategic leadership. She's the intersection of content and experiences. Okay, Louise, let's start at the beginning. So you were a reporter in college, throughout college, and then you worked for...
I worked for the New York Times for years.
Okay,
and then I worked for the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, the New York Times, 2006?
2006, I got going there on staff, and my first beat was to cover the advertising industry and a bit of the media, which I had no idea would be relevant later to me thinking as a business leader, but it really has helped to understand advertising.
Perfect segue to where you are today when we get to that. Okay.
Yeah. So I covered advertising, and I had gone to business.
Advertising like Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and GM?
You know, it was such an interesting area. I covered, I worked in partnership with someone named Stuart Elliott, probably.
Everyone knows Stuart
Everyone
Elliott,
knows Stuart, right? So he would take some story. At that time, the New York Times ran an advertising column 5 days a week. So, you know, I would do the column.
And today it's... whatever.
I don't even know what regularity it is. It was reduced. But so I would do them 2 or 3 days a week. He would do them the other, we'd split them up. And so I got to write on basically every company, because whether it's an airline or hotel, because
every company is an advertiser, is a marketer.
Right. And then I also got to write about media companies and what they were doing with advertising, and, really interesting things going on at the time with the measurement of online clicks and how you thought about things with that. It was very much evolving back in 2006. It's like
ComScore and Nielsen and all those companies.
Yeah. And also thinking about the entrance of tech giants. I mean, I was at that party, probably maybe you were too, when Facebook first came to New York. And
no, I was at the party when AOL, because I'm predating you, made it big in New York.
Okay. But it was at this time that they were, a small thing, and they were starting to come. So it definitely helped me understand more about the business in which we're all working. Many reporters didn't really know about how advertising worked, and I just learned it because I covered it.
Was it hard to cover advertising back then? Like, were people reaching out to you? Like, how did you get your ideas?
Okay. Were people reaching out to me? This is the advertising industry. This is free advertising.
Oh my
to be
God.
In the New York Times. I was deluged. Okay. This was probably when I was the most popular as a reporter, was when I covered advertising, right? Because people...
And then you picked and choose who you wanted to write about?
What would be a good story? What would our audience be interested in?
Did they try to schmooze you back then and you couldn't take it? Like, I got good tickets to the U.S. Open. You want to come with me?
No, I wouldn't be taking that kind of stuff. But people are very friendly in advertising. I am still in touch with many people I got to know during that beat. And I really enjoyed it. And
love it. Okay, so then
I wanted to cover Wall Street. So I had done my MBA, and I was saying to the business editor, I could cover finance.
Who was the business editor?
His name is Larry Ingrassia.
Okay.
And he worked at the Wall Street Journal a long time, then the New York Times, and LA Times. Great business editor, mentored many prominent business journalists. So I had said to him since I was hired, I could cover finance. I have my MBA. And it was like, no, we don't need anyone there. Cover advertising. And then the day after Bear Stearns collapsed.
2008. Okay.
He came over to my desk and said, yeah, we could use another person on the Wall Street team.
Oh, because everything blew up and
everything was blowing up. They needed more people. And so he said, why don't you cover...
Right place at the right time.
Right place at the right time. And why don't you cover Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch? So I'm like, okay, sure. So I started covering them in March of 2008. And as you know, both of those companies had collapsed by September of 2008. And so that whole summer, I was in the executive halls at those banks, as well as talking to short sellers who were betting against them, trying to understand what was going to happen.
You saw everything.
It was really interesting, yeah. And
that's when we all thought the stock market was going to zero.
I'll never forget.
I remember it was Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, 2008.
Yeah, in September, I'll never forget. Congress was debating the bailout, and there were a lot of banks lobbying for it. And I'll never forget, getting some phone calls from different lobbyists who were not only lobbying in Washington, but they were lobbying reporters basically to write that it was needed. And I remember, one of the most common lines that they were using, which may have been right, I don't know, was, listen, if we don't get this bailout, you're going to go to the ATM and you're not going to get money. And that was what people were saying.
Well, I remember it in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, at 7 World Trade Center, like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah. So after that, I went on to cover the companies that continued to exist, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and then I really dug into a number of investigations about what had caused the crisis.
And what's the difference between reporting and investigations?
Well, all good reporting should be a little investigative, if not a lot investigative, meaning all good reporting should be probe deeply, right? And so there's
Producer Andrew, there you go. That's what we're calling this.
Probe deeply. And one of my mentors in journalism, Steve Brill, who, founded American Lawyer and Court TV, I took a course from him in college, would say the term investigative reporting is redundant.
Oh, because all reporting should be investigative.
Right.
Thank you.
So put that out there for Steve. But, when you're at a place like the New York Times, if you get to do investigative reporting, it basically means you get longer to work on an assignment, right? And you're not just covering something.
I'm just thinking about that in today's world, because you have no time to work on an assignment. Back then, before the technology, you probably had as much time as you needed to do a really good job, I would hope.
I think, a number of the really excellent news outlets out there today are still providing time to people to investigate things. I don't think that's fully gone away. And in fact, and we can circle back to this, I guess, when we get into AI, but I think investigative reporting is more important than ever with AI, because you really need to uncover new things that aren't just in the LLMs.
Right.
But, so when I got to do investigative reporting, it just meant I had more time. And it meant
more
I got
time, longer pieces, more research.
And a mandate to ask tougher questions and to look at what went wrong. Non-investigative reporting a lot of times is either a feature-y, light piece, or it's just covering something that happened.
Yeah.
You're just writing what happened. And in investigative reporting, I'm really simplifying this, you're really probing to find something nobody knows about.
And it's also always original, right? Pretty much?
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. And so I did a number of the investigative pieces of what happened. I partnered with an incredible reporter named Gretchen Morgensen on a number of the pieces at that time. And, we uncovered a lot of different things. And in fact, one piece that we co-author led to the Goldman Sachs case, where Goldman Sachs paid a $550 million settlement to the SEC. And there was this famous 11-hour hearing in Washington, if you remember, where Goldman was questioned and people were watching it. Anyway, so we covered all that. And then from that, I went to the investigations unit of the New York Times, which is where you're in this unit. It's a very small unit, but all you're there to do is investigate things. And I got to do some really impactful investigations there. Okay,
question. Did you ever think you would leave being a reporter to do everything else you ended up doing in your career back then?
No, I didn't know. It's not that I thought I never would leave. I guess I didn't know the path ahead, and I'm a really open-minded person. I think it's part of being
because you're zigzag when we get to where you are now. It's crazy.
I know, but I'm a super curious person, which is why I think I'm a reporter, and so that's why I've zigzagged. Because if something comes up and it's interesting, I'm willing to go that way.
Okay, so you're still at the New York Times. You're now in this new investigative unit.
I go to the investigative unit. I do multiple investigations. One of them that's probably most well known is that I investigated all of the owners in the Time Warner complex in a project about illicit money. It ran in 2015. This is before the Panama Papers and before all the focus on LLCs, and found a couple dozen people in there who had bought through LLCs and were hiding a form of ill-gotten gains. And one of the people that I uncovered there, and I reported with a partner, we reported on people in 22 countries. And one of the people we uncovered there was a Malaysian business person who turned out to be a front for the Malaysian prime minister and had helped steal over $6 billion from the Malaysian people. And I was able to go around to all these properties in the U.S. and pin down what they were. And the day this article ran, the U.S. DOJ opened a grand jury case and ultimately returned $6 billion to the Malaysian people, and Goldman Sachs ended up paying billions of dollars for their role.
It's the power of journalism, right? What you're talking about.
Yes.
It doesn't happen that much today. It doesn't feel like it does.
It happens sometimes, and it's so important. And
But that must have felt you must have felt great about what you did.
well, I am sorry when these things happen that need to be covered. It's not that I'm happy bad stuff happened, but to set it right and get it out there.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And having the backing of a place like the New York Times, where when you go investigate billionaires, they tend to send lawyers
Right.
To complain to your company. So it's a really important role that news organizations play to say we back our reporters. They have a right to look into this stuff.
I've known you for like 3 or 4 months, right? Since we met at that toll bit party.
Yep.
But I'm looking in a whole different light right now, knowing
thank
that's
you.
what you did. That's awesome. Okay. So Investigative, the small group, and then what happened?
Okay, so then, if you recall, back in that time period, back around 2013, the New York Times was not in the financial state it's in today. Today, everyone thinks about how successful the New York Times is, how it's a model for the media. But actually, back then, it was financially struggling, and it had to lease its building to a Mexican billionaire. And so the executive editor at the time asked A.G. Sulzberger, who's now the publisher, but at that time was an editor in Metro, if he would convene a group of people from around the newsroom to try to figure out the digital future for the company.
And what was it called?
It ended up being called the Innovation Committee, and we put out the Innovation Report, which Neiman Labs, is called, the most important document of the era.
I remember that distinctly, yes.
And so I was able to co-write that with him, and it kicked off lots of change at the New York Times. It's been very successful. And having that experience, it was really the first strategic thing I did in the media, not
and
just
did you
reporting.
talk to like everyone at the company at the most senior levels when you put that together?
Yeah. And
you had full exposure to everyone.
Absolutely. And people around the industry.
Okay.
And also, users and readers of the New York Times and looking at data.
How much time did you spend on that?
It was, considered, a full-time project.
Okay, but like months and months and months?
It was we started in, I think, August of 2013, and the report came out. It leaked, actually, in May of 2014. So a little under a year. It's online. People could find it. And it kicked off a lot of change at the New York Times that has worked out. And for me personally, AG did this thing that was really terrific, which is that he convened a multidisciplinary team.
Well, someone to have the wherewithal to do that in 2013 is remarkable, and put the resource against it too.
Yeah. And I think that's how the Times has broken out, is because not only with that report, but several things the New York Times did in that era were really focused on building the teams of the future, building the products of the future, building the model of the future, diversifying, and it has worked out.
And
well.
who was running the Times then? Was it?
It was Mark Thompson,
Okay.
But Meredith was already there also working for Mark, and then she would continue this.
Okay, so what year is this now? 20.
So the report came out in 2014.
Right, and you're on your way to sort of running the New York Times. Right, you're on the short list. I heard.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Joking.
Really. Then I went and ran the live video unit of the New York Times. So a little short of the entire New York Times.
And I said that's like the precursor to the Daily.
Yeah, it was. We had a live video program I had hosted.
You hosted it.
Well, so first, before the live video unit, I hosted Business Day Live and then partially the Times Cast.
Okay.
Which was very much a precursor to the Daily. And
Right.
then I ran this live video unit, which was actually over 300 journalists in the New York Times were participating in live streaming around the world. It was really incredible because
Feels like that was ahead of its time, right? What they were doing.
I think so.
Okay.
And what was also ahead of its time is that reporters were live streaming while they were reporting. And we required people to ask at least 3 audience questions while they were reporting to whoever they were interviewing. So it basically meant that audiences were involved in shaping the interview and ultimately the story, right?
that.
Because then you could get a quote that you might not have gotten. And so that was really exciting. I set up the New York Times' first control room so that we could be, live streaming.
Is this the new office building they're at now?
Is in the new office building. And, we, like on election night in 2016, you all remember that was a big election night. We were live for 11 hours straight. And
That's when they had the meter.
That's when they had the
And
meter.
the meter gradually started going the wrong direction. I went to bed at that point.
We were live during that, and so that was a great experience. And really, it was the last thing I did at the New York Times before I was recruited by the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, so reporter, investigative, wrote the manifesto, digital strategy, and then boom, you got recruited by the Wall Street Journal, the only other place you would probably go. And then instead of doing reporting, you became what role then? Which blew me away when I was looking at your bio.
So I first started at the Wall Street Journal running all of the newsroom strategy.
Okay.
So I was brought in as a content strategy leader.
Did they have that role before?
Not in the same configuration. And this was because the Wall Street Journal, had been early in digital to have a paywall, and had been financially pretty secure from that. But then over time, because the Wall Street Journal had this digital subscriber base, the journal had not focused on the full funnel, on the top of funnel reach, and so was falling behind and wasn't having the kind of digital subscription growth they wanted. And so I was brought in to help make the newsroom more digital, to change the content strategy. I was in the rotation. Every few weeks, I would be the acting editor-in-chief on the weekends to put the whole edition out. And I did that for a few months. And as I started right away...
But that's a big job, right?
Well, I was one of the top 4 editors.
Okay.
So I was one of the top 4 editors in the masthead.
Okay.
And lots to do involved in the news coverage. And then also the ways in which the newsroom worked. Data in the newsroom. And one of the initial projects I got involved in was the CMS. The journal really needed
the content management system. What did they have and what did they go to?
We ended up going to WordPress.
Oh, kills me.
But I got really involved in that right when I got there because it was so clear to me versus the
Which is the most important piece of software.
It's very important in a content operation. And I got working on that. And then I very quickly saw when working with the person there who was the chief product and technology officer that the product and tech teams were split up among the Wall Street Journal. Some to advertising, some to opinion, some to news, some to marketing and subscriptions. And no unit had very many. And so no one felt like they were getting much out of these teams. And so I just suggested, do you think we could have a common prioritization process, bring everything together, and if we have the same goals, we could get more done, which sounds so obvious.
And this is be careful you wish for, it might come true.
So they said, great, let's organize it. So I helped make this process. And then I'd only been at the Journal a few months. We made this process, and the chief product and technology officer at the Journal got promoted to be the deputy CTO of News Corp. And so then they said, well, Louise, while you keep this masthead news editor job, will you also be the chief product and technology officer for the full Wall Street Journal? So the business side, advertising. And so, I told you I'm a curious person. I like things.
Sure,
I
bring it
walk
on.
through doors. So I said, yes.
And who was running the Wall Street Journal then?
Well, at that time, Will Lewis was the CEO of Dow Jones, which meant he was the publisher of the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my friend Jamie Heller.
Oh, Jamie is one of the best editors in the business, now a Business Insider. And at that time, she was running the corporate business team, and her team was breaking all the stories.
Okay. So you got this big job doing CTO, CPO, and everything. And you did that for 3 years?
Yeah.
That must have been remarkable.
It was also a remarkable period because the pandemic hit.
Okay.
Right. And so for a year and a half of my tenure, people were remote, but we were still able to get tons done. And really in that period, we doubled the Wall Street Journal's digital subscriber base.
Okay.
And I really think a lot of that came out of it was great teamwork with the marketing team, the membership team, the chief subscription officer, but it also very much came out of aligning everyone's roadmap. So when you have the tech team actually work on the same thing as the content team, actually work on the same thing as the marketing team, you can really make progress. And I would say that's what I didn't come up as an engineer, but that's what I was really able to bring to this job as chief product and technology officer and also running the content strategy. Because remember, usually you wouldn't have those jobs at the same time. I was across the whole thing. And so I was able to help us all go at the same pace in the same direction. And
so as I said before, now you're on your way to running the Wall Street Journal. Then what happened?
Okay. So if you remember in 2020, George Floyd was murdered.
Yes.
And out of that, in every company, there were lots of discussions about racial equity. And so I, like many people, had those conversations also at work and personally. And I ended up, and we were in our homes on Zoom in the pandemic, I ended up having a number of those conversations with a woman who was on my team, Ebony Reed. And at one point I said, what is the gap between wealth and Black Americans, white Americans? And we looked it up and saw that the typical Black family has 15 cents in wealth compared to $1 in wealth held by the typical white family. So it's 15 cents on the dollar. And Ebony, who's a Black woman, was shocked. I was shocked. We knew there was a gap, but that's a big gap.
I didn't think it was that big.
It's a big gap. And so we talked in the beginning of 2021, kind of in passing, about, hey, maybe we should write the book on this. We're a great pair. Louise has covered Wall Street. Ebony had covered a lot of community journalism. Like, she'd been in Detroit during the 2008 crisis when I was covering the banks.
You had all the wherewithal between both of you to put it all
and
together.
We're a Black and white pair of authors. There actually was no book in existence that covered this gap through history. So we talked about it in passing. And then your life changes in ways you don't expect sometimes. And a tragedy hit, and this is all public, and she talks about it. Ebony's fiance died in the middle of the night. And when that happened, she was out a few months. I talked with her every day, seeing how she was doing. She came back to work 3 months later. We're on Zoom. And I said, are you ready to be back? She said, yes. And I said, okay. So what do you want to start on? And she says, I have something important to tell you, Louise. I'm like, okay. She says, before Therese died, I told him about your idea that we should write a book together on the Black-White wealth gap. And he urged me to write this book with you.
So
what do you think I said?
Let's do it.
As I told you, I'll take a turn. A door opens
so then
and I should walk through.
You left the Wall Street Journal?
I left the Wall Street Journal.
To write the book?
Come on, I had chief product and technology officer, and I was one of the top editors. I really held 2 jobs. Could I do that and write the definitive history of the Black-White wealth gap through American history? No. So, but I felt good. My team was in a great place after 3 years. They were running. It had been intense from the pandemic.
That's a crazy zigzag.
I never would have predicted that. You asked me if I would have predicted.
Oh, that's why I was like my career is like simple. I see how I got. You were like, how did you get there?
Just because I'm open-minded, and if it makes sense and it's interesting, I'll go.
Okay, so you wrote the book. Both of you wrote the book.
We wrote the book. And it's narrative nonfiction. It came out last year. It was a bestseller. Oprah and The New Yorker both put it on their best books of 2024. Thank you. Thank you. We wrote it during a very interesting time for equity in this country where the discussion changed, but we thought it was important to stay the course, put our book out there. It's not political at all. We've heard from conservative people as well as liberal people that they've learned a lot, that they've really appreciated it because it's stories of people and it's data, but it's not political. So,
Producer Andrew, we need to get copies of this book and that's phenomenal.
Thank you. And so while I was doing this book, one thing I knew, I wanted the book to be incredible, but I also knew once you turn in a book, it takes, several months till it goes to print.
Right.
And then there's book touring. And I had an experience a few years earlier, right before I went to the Wall Street Journal. I had produced and written a feature-length documentary film. And
why not?
Why not? Same thing. The door opened, so I did it. And it's called The Kleptocrats. If anyone wants to look it up, it's a thriller, and it's about the world's largest kleptocracy case, which I uncovered, right, the Malaysia. So anyways, one thing I always regretted is that I wrapped that film, and then I started the Journal, and it debuted at New York City Doc Fest once I was at the Journal. So I went to the premiere, but I didn't have the freedom to go around the world, push it the way it could be pushed, to be out on my social, and it was a great film. So when I decided to do this book, I just decided I would not take a full-time job till the book was
without you pushing
out.
it wasn't going to do
if
what
you don't push your work, no one sees it in today's world, right?
And you knew it was important enough where you had to push that.
Why would I write it if not, so I knew. So I just committed to myself, I would not open myself to jobs till it was fully rolled out.
Okay, and then people started knocking at your door, right?
As soon as I left the Journal, I was really fortunate that a number of media companies.
Okay, can you give me some of the list?
Nikkei, which owns the FT, or Yahoo, or Daily Mail, lots of different big players that I respect so much.
Well, now that I know your background, of course they reached out to you because it's phenomenal.
Thank you. Reached out, and I was able to work with a lot of places really in a unique way by understanding content, the way content's made. I know the whole tech stack.
Yeah. How many other people know that?
Right. So it's just a rare mix. And so it actually ended up being, I never knew I'd have this portfolio life. That was unexpected to me. But I ended up, being able to consult while doing the book. And also, given the topic of the book, I wanted to donate all the proceeds of the book.
Oh my God, you're
I was
amazing.
like, wealth gap, right?
You're
I'm not making any
amazing.
money from this. So I really appreciate that I was able to have that consulting, because it made it possible for me, just every penny in the book, to donate to nonprofits related to that topic. So I consulted also.
I'm going to make my wife listen to this interview, and then I'm going to buy her the book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate readers. So I did that 3.5 years. And then, by the end of last year, 2024, we toured, the book was out, it was on these lists, and I felt like, okay, I did what I wanted to do. And so coming into this year, I think I could have consulted pretty indefinitely, but also I'm not that old. I love to support a team. I like to be with people. So coming into this year, I thought, if I can find the right fit, I'd really love to go support a team at another super interesting company.
And you're now the CEO of
Atlas Obscura.
What a crazy ass journey.
And I brought this book. I brought one of our books. There you go. And a lot of people know Atlas Obscura from our books. We've had many best-selling books and more coming out. But, also we've got this great mobile app and website and podcasts and all kinds of things.
And you've been there for how long as a CEO?
I'm just about 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's jump into the future.
Okay.
And then from all your background and everything you're doing out at Atlas Obscura, running the entire company, what do you see as the future of journalism now? Where's it going? What are you nervous about? What do you like? Just open it up.
Okay. So I think that the future of journalism, and I'll say that very specifically, news, I think, is more specific than all of content.
So we're breaking out news and
then broader and information.
And then everything else is lifestyle and everything else. Okay.
Right. And the reason I want to say that is because, I've spent 20 years in the news industry, and Atlas Obscura is not a news company. So I'll give you my view on news with all the experience I have, but it's a little bit different.
Give me news, then give me
information
and then lifestyle.
That sounds good. Okay.
Okay.
So for news, it's as important as ever. And I think news will always be important, but in particular, new news, new information. And one of the things that I think is a really interesting turn of fate is that a number of things in the earlier iteration of the internet, for example, the way people, optimized for Google search, for example, and the way people could summarize other people's stories, some of the different websites and just run them, actually incentivized news companies to put more and more reporters writing on the same things.
They're just repackaging another story.
Other stories, or seeing that something's trending, so you just write on that even if you don't really have new info. And that was a way that a lot of news companies changed some of their staffing, changed their focus to optimize.
Because to hire someone to repackage is a lot different than to hire someone to write new news.
Yes, not only could you say maybe you could talk about economics, is it cheaper or not, but not only that, even if it was the same price, what was going on with Google and to some degree the social media sites is the way to get traffic was to cover something that was already online, already trending. Something has to be trending first for you to get more traffic. So in fact, it discouraged news companies
the flywheel
on the margin from actually putting new stuff up. Because in order to get traffic, a lot of news orgs, the best way to get traffic was to jump on something that was trending. It actually, I always think, in the financial crisis with the housing market, one of the reasons the banks failed to understand what was happening is they were looking at old data about housing to predict what would happen. And whenever you only look at data about the past, it doesn't always predict the future. And to some degree, the way that optimizing for Google and for social sites evolved in the teens before, 2020, 2021, before AI, the only thing you're incentivized really to do to get more traffic was to look at the data at what audiences were already reading, and they could only be reading things that were already out there, and therefore none of it's new. And so that, I'm simplifying, but pushed more resources in the news complex onto repackaging, and not actually as much just uncovering new information. And what I think is really interesting about this time period now with AI, and I think frankly is great because remember, I'm an investigative reporter at heart, is that now the thing that has value is new information because the old information's already in ChatGPT. And so I actually think that this era, if news companies can navigate it and figure out how to be paid for things and how to serve their audiences, could be a time for public impact where news companies are really incentivized to uncover new things, which is what we need for the world.
But it feels like it's going to take these news organizations a cycle before they all figure that out.
It's very tricky getting there.
It's hard to...
I'm looking ahead, okay? I'm looking ahead, but I think...
It's a complete 180 for some of them, what they've turned into.
Yeah.
Okay.
But some of the news orgs that still, and some of the best ones did, retained excellent reporting staffs that could go out and uncover things, are best positioned.
Which are some of the ones that seems like they're the most valuable to LLMs today because they have all this unique
That's right.
content.
That's right.
Okay.
So the whole paradigm has flipped, which is pretty interesting. And so I think the future of news in the longer term is still promising. There are a lot of short-term questions about how news companies are compensated for the new information that they uncover. And I think it's really important that fair compensation is a big part of the public discussion. But in terms of, let's put money aside, just say the value to the world of what these companies are creating, the fact that more and more news companies are really incentivized now to get new information, I think is good.
Okay, so that's the news bucket.
Yes.
You want to go into the information bucket?
Okay. So then we have, information and, a lot of information.
Who do you put in the information bucket? Is it
certainly like a dot dash.
Okay. I put them in lifestyle as well.
Oh, they're in both. They play in both.
Okay. I would like AccuWeather.
Okay. We can define it that way. Okay. That's interesting. Because I also like to think about things about whether they're evergreen.
Okay, so do the DDM. Do JR, Lindsay Van
Yeah,
DDM.
or if they're new and changing incrementally. So I think...
It's your story, pun intended, go.
So for the evergreen players, which has a big overlap with lifestyle, also has some overlap with personal finance, evergreen information. I think it's a much harder period. And the future, there's really some very creative and smart thinking that those players are going to have to do because evergreen information is so much easier to get within the LLMs.
Because once they get it once, if it's evergreen, it
doesn't really change.
Even though DDM updates their content every 6 months, they're not updating it that much, right?
Right. And remember also the model that many of the big evergreen players have used to resource control what they update has been what's trending on search. And that landscape's changing too, or what's trending. A lot of what evergreen companies do is they groom their content based on what they see is trending, and that's changing at the same time too. So I think they're in a much trickier spot. Not to say that they're not going to figure it out. A lot of those companies are very smart people. I know you featured some people from those companies on this show, but...
Yeah, today I posted something on LinkedIn that said the average query on Google used to be 1 to 2 words, and now it's 3 to 4 words.
Huh. What do you make of that?
Well, I think they know it's AI, and they're putting more information in to get a better result from an LLM.
Very interesting.
And I'm like, oh, but that makes sense. But behavior's changing across the entire search landscape quickly. I used to think it was going to take years and years, and now I feel like it's going to take months and months before everything totally changes.
And I wonder if the 3 or 4 words coincides with people asking a question.
I think instead of best car,
they say, what is the best car? Or a even more interesting question than that.
Right. So I think is
the Volvo better than that?
It becomes more natural language with questions versus a couple words that the LM doesn't really know, but the sentence, I think you get better an answer when you put more in.
So, by the way, that user behavior of wanting to ask a question and get an answer has major repercussions for all these buckets: news, information, and evergreen.
Tell me more about that.
Well, most content companies, the vast majority of their content is written in a way and presented in a way to let the audience just make up their mind for themselves. So unless it's a particular opinion column that's arguing the case, but that's not the majority of the content that a lot of these players make, the content is traditionally a he said, she said. well, some people think this, some people think that. You could do this, you could do that. And it's really been, a respect for the public, that it's left up to the public to read it, decide. Increasingly, I'm not sure the public wants that. Increasingly, when you look at what people are doing, they just want the answer. And so when you see they're asking questions, do they want to go and read in and just and think it through, or do they just want the answer that's right for them? And so it's not everyone who's there. A lot of people still like to do some research and think, but I think it's fewer people who really want to dig, digest all that, synthesize it, and decide for themselves. A lot of people want answers, which then starts to undercut the essential value of all this content when the content was created not to answer a question, but instead to give you all the different possible answers. But now you just want the answer. People have to fundamentally think about that content differently.
Yeah, everything's moving so quickly. It's like you don't know. What do you think's going to happen the next few years? Like, where do you see this going? Do you see companies blocking the bots? Do you think companies get paid? Is there a marketplace? Have you thought about that at all?
I do not have all the answers. You may have more answers than me.
This is your conversation.
Okay. So, but I'm thinking about that actively, for where I am at Atlas Obscura, but of course that's also a different media platform than some of the other ones we're talking about here. But I see a few things. First of all, I do think there will still be a strong subscription model for some content companies. But what I've seen both, at the Times, the Journal, and a lot of my consulting clients is that for people to pay for content, you need it at work, or maybe it's games. But
and it's original?
And it's original and often new, not out there yet.
Okay.
But there are companies that fit that,
There's a handful.
Right? Especially, again, in business-oriented content. You need it at work. It's coming out there first. I think people will pay for that. Do those places need to reinvent their formats? Yes. Do they need to, but just the actual info. Other than that, I don't, people aren't going to pay for the content. And so then you say, well, what is the content on a site that no one would pay for if that content's also in an LLM, which all of it gets in there. And so I think for those companies where the content is not something that would pay for, is not new, is more evergreen, then you have to understand that if you want to have a platform, it's got to serve a purpose other than just showing a standard story format, because your story's in ChatGPT. And so then those stories are great, they're interesting, they're important, but they almost become marketing for something else that you can offer. And I'm thinking a lot about how, content is data, right? And so how do you think about the content you have, as a media leader, the content you have, and how it could be more useful to people in different formats or integrated into a product? So
have you seen any news, information, or lifestyle, the three buckets, create any new products that are of interest in the past couple years? Like, there's only one that I know of.
Yes.
Particle News.
I don't know that. Tell me about them. I don't know much about them.
So it's an app, and you tell it what you like, and then it goes and fetches all the articles and gives you a synthesized version, puts it all together, and then I can play a little audio for me and listen to it. And it's actually pretty compelling. Like,
who made that?
I'm talking to the woman on Friday at our meeting.
Okay.
I forget.
Okay.
But it's just like, that's one of the, and I don't think most publishers that we talk about have developed new products out there. They're still displaying the news story the same way.
I think they need to change. I think that the industry is going to be in a serious problem if they don't.
But you were the perfect person to change it, since you were the CPO, the CTO on the editorial side. So, like,
and I did push things in that direction in many ways,
it's scary, that type of change.
Yes, change is not easy for people, but consumer interest and behavior and the whole internet's changing, so we have to change. And I'll give you an example of something I'm thinking about, like, just to make it tangible. And again, I'm early in my days as CEO of Atlas Obscura.
3 months, right?
3 months in. But for example, a very typical article at Atlas Obscura, which is, Atlas Obscura is a travel community. We have 2.5 million registered users who share what they're interested in. And then we have all of this amazing journalistic content people have made. And it's about hidden wonders, hidden gems, going off the beaten path, okay? So a typical article,
That's the Obscura?
that's the Obscura.
Thank you.
That's the Obscura.
I figured it out.
That's the Obscura.
Thank you.
And I think it resonates with everyone because everyone has something really special they like to track down, you know?
Like I like going to supermarkets whenever I travel anywhere.
That's cool.
Like
That's
walking
cool.
up and down the aisles of supermarkets, especially in a foreign country, pure joy.
So that's your Obscura.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. So a typical article could be, here are the 4 places near the Amalfi Coast that are not as crowded. So that's something you might see on our website because, again, our website also has an ethos about getting off the beaten path, getting away from the crowds, and so on. So that could be an article like now, just in a story bucket with the photos of the 4 places and everything. But what about think down the road about how that also can be used, for example, when you're making travel choices in different prompts and buttons and notifications where you're making choices. Hey, you're going there, but there's these 4 other places, in nudges. So for content companies, especially in the evergreen space, to think about their content is data that can be inputted into different product features is, I think, a pretty interesting path.
Yeah, but I think typically most media companies don't have great product people to be able to develop the tech to do these things.
I think they're going to need to
they need to
invest in that.
Yes.
And I mean, so one of the reasons I was able to transition to become a chief product and technology officer.
Because you're curious.
Not only I'm curious, for sure.
I pay attention.
But thank you, yes. But also, I'm pretty obsessed with just audiences. Like when I was just a reporter in my 20s at the New York Times, and I was in the New York City subway, I loved watching people across the aisle reading the New York Times to see if they were reading my story. And I wouldn't tell them I worked there. I would just watch their face and see where they quit. And so I'm just pretty obsessed with...
You can't do that today.
No, not as easily, but we get the data. And, I really always like the comments and so I think, one of the reasons that I was able to move into that is that, like, at the heart of excellent product development is really caring about the end user and what their needs are and what they're doing with it. And that's where, traditionally sometimes news companies haven't cared enough about that. And so, and I think many have improved in that, but have to keep going that way.
Okay, one more question. Atlas Obscura, hidden gems. You said it's a community.
Yes.
What makes it a community? Are there conversations happening? Tell me more about that.
Sure. So Atlas Obscura, from the beginning, was actually founded as a crowdsourcing initiative at the very beginning.
Okay.
The 2 co-founders of it got together. One of them had been on a road trip, and they said, "How come there's nothing online where you can just look at a map and see the kind of really most interesting things anywhere you are?" And so they put it out online. They said, "Who will contribute?" And it started with people, really UGC 2009, contributing places. Over time, the company grew. It got funding. The first CEO was David Plotz, who had been the CEO of Slate. Who had been the editor-in-chief of Slate.
Okay.
So they built a whole newsroom. So over time, it became this combination of, commissioned journalistic articles, but still this community where people have registered. People submit places they think are really cool that people haven't heard of. Usually try to look that they're not like just on the internet. They go in, the editor team will look and make sure that it is something that's obscure, edit it, and put it up. And so we have 30,000 places on our map, geotagged, you could be anywhere, that are from our community. So what makes it a community site is that our content is a combination of community submitted, journalistically edited content combined with more traditional journalism. And the people who have contributed this, we have 2.5 million registered users, have their own social profile pages where they're marking where they have been, where they want to go. And so it's a pretty unique place on the internet. And we're going to build that out more.
Fascinating conversation. It's like I'm just blown away by the backstory, the history, everything, and where you are today.
Thank you.
And looking forward to where you're going to be next and how you're going to grow your company. And look at you and smile.
Thanks for having me.
Producer Andrew, pretty friggin' awesome conversation. Thank you very much. As always, thank you, Open Web. Thank you, everyone. Any questions, let us know, and we'll bring you more conversations. Thank you.